神よの剣を携えて神増島へと向かう北緯の剣気。かや皿の木に咲く白の中、ひときわ異彩に咲き生える枯れずの赤い椿にも似た琥珀。そして私がたどり着いた夜、互いに惹かれ合うように波に運ばれやってきた少女。
波。
投げ入れられた6つの小石、波紋が重なり綾をなし、まだ見ぬ絵巻を織り上げる月の満ち欠け、
潮の満ち引き、
水面を乱す定めの巡
り、瑠璃の都にまどろむ竜の
り、いざなう嵐に私は抗う。
無限の波はわだつみの鼓動。
青い城。
Alright. Let's continue on with Aoi Shiro tonight.
ロードするファイルを選んで。
For at least as long as we're able to. So, if we remember from last time... Actually, I don't remember much from last time. We're on Kohaku's route, though. So, the main things that happened that were different last time in the start of Kohaku's route were that we got some more of these hints of... Let me adjust my microphone. We got some more of the hints that Syouko may have had some sort of past life connection, and also during the test of courage this time, instead of dying, as we did the first time we tried going through this route because we didn't have the seals unlocked for Kohaku's route, you enter into a fight sequence wherein Syouko eventually backs up against the Tokisaki no Tsubaki, and all of its petals fall down, as happened in the Yasumi route. So, Syouko is very disconcerted about this person in front of her, who seems to be some sort of menacing presence, of course, and also seems to have some connection to her in memories that she feels are not her own. That's generally as far as we are now, but like Kohaku is being very cool on screen all the time, and we're getting flashes like, you know, Syouko envisioning herself in the past as Kohaku stands before her, bravely defending her from some sort of imminent threat. So we're really just like along for the ride for right now, trying to figure out why she has these memories, and it probably has a little bit something to do with the things that you could have seen in Kaya's route, but of course I spared everyone Kaya's route because, I mean, it's weird. Kaya's route is not exactly something that I wanted to share with everyone. It's more something that I just felt I had to get through. So I got through it as quickly as possible. And now, let's go ahead. Let me get my guide up momentarily so that I make sure that we are on good track for completing Kohaku's route without mangling anything too terribly. Yes. So, let's go. Alright. So, she's offered, of course, to teach Syouko some things. And you can... so, again, the choices for these dialogue options are not necessarily intuitive all the time. But essentially this is an acceptance and this is a polite refusal. Which, like, if you think about it in terms of the Japanese that you would use for a polite refusal, this makes more sense. But anyhow... I wonder if you could also call this a connection formed while traveling. It wouldn't be what Momoko called the ultimate Onitaiji sword skills, but One wouldn't learn ordinary sword skills from someone calling themselves a Tengu. And also, this person and I were...
Yoshi. Dewa.
I saw her grip her sword in a stance. Flustered, I yelped.
ちょっと待ってください。一度戻らないと仲間が。
The Tsubaki spirit thought for a moment before sheathing her longsword.
では、後で抜け出してこい。
She narrowed her open right eye in amusement.
逃げるなよ。
She laughed with a scary expression on her face. I might have made a mistake just then. My return ended the test of courage. After everyone else went to bed, I once again headed out to where the Tokusaki no Tsubaki was. Since the flowers had scattered, the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, it really couldn't be called an everlasting camellia anymore, could it? Since that Tokusaki no Tsubaki was still okay, even in such a condition, was that person really a Tsubaki spirit? Well, deep down, I wondered if those Oni, the Morio, were going to attack again as I headed towards where I promised I would meet her.
気負ったな。
She herself looked like a flower. That person was standing under the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, whose flowers had fallen. Ah, what a wonderful transition white. I had confidence in my stamina and ability to hold my breath, but I was pushed until I was exhausted. That person was shorter, but she looked down at me on my hands and knees, wheezing as she spoke.
まあ、今宵はこの程度にしてやろう。今宵は？ほう。
She narrowed her eye, giving me an amused and dangerous look as she spoke.
なんだ？お主極めたつもりか？
She lifted her sword and asked me if I felt I was strong at the level as I was, or if I was strong at the level I was at now. If that were the case, then she would be asking me to prove it by defeating her. My only choice was to silently shake my head. The wipe transitions in this route are excellent.
こんな時間に一体何を。
Perhaps Mikiwa also had gone to the stepping stones today. I wanted to retort that she was the same as me, but I had no energy for that.
僕と？山の中でこれ降らされてたのよ。特訓？特訓といえば特訓かな。疲れた。
It wasn't just from the practice, but I also had traveled to and from the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, where Oni could appear at any time.
へえ、それはこんな時間までご苦労様で。
Mikiwa looked at me suspiciously.
なわけないか。
I was in an unfamiliar place. I saw a dream. I saw a dream, knowing that it was a dream. The dream me was much younger than I was now and had glossy, long, jet black hair. I don't remember the length of my hair ever being past my shoulders, even in childhood. Since the person in the dream wasn't me, this wasn't reality. Since the person in the dream wasn't me, this wasn't a sunken memory. That's why it had to be a dream. The dream me was protected behind someone's back. That also gave me the feeling of deja vu. On the night when I met the Tsubaki spirit, why did my tears start overflowing? Was it because of the thoughts of myself from that dream?
あなたはとても若く見えます。教えてくれた年よりも当よりさらに若く見えます。
お主はとうにも満たぬ嵐のくせに 大人のような逆知らな口を聞くのだな。
もしや蓬莱さんの霊視や人魚の肉でも口にしたのですか？
確かにいろいろ口にはしたが、そのような良いものは食った覚えがないな。わしを拾った育ての親が一条堀川に住む陰陽師だな。幼き頃より怪しげなにやら何やらをこの体で試されたのよ。
Hello, Child Protective Services from ancient Japan.
おかげで年を取らん体になったが、この髪を見よ。老婆のように真っ白ではないか。
積もる雪のようですし、絹の糸のようですし、なんとも綺麗ではありませんか。
お主の黒々と長い髪の方が美しいと思うがな。だいたい年を取らぬということはいいことばかりではないぞ。苦労もそれなりについてくる。骨も肉も育たぬゆえ、鍛えたところで小兵のままだ。当然ながら強い弓は引けぬし、我が弓は恥ずかしくて敵の前には流せぬわ。それに昔から双子の兄、もしやすると弟かもしれぬが、わしは兄じゃと呼んでおる。影役を務めておるのだがな。見た目の年が離れたせいで兄者に化けるのが難しくなった。今は手妻やら目くらましの類でごまかしておるが、それもいつまで持つことやら。
そのことですけど、九郎様、男なりをしていてもあなたは女人なのでしょう。ならば人並みに年を取っていたとしても、やはり今頃はおの子の兄弟に化けるのは難しくなっていたのではないでしょうか。
おお、お互い小さなわらしの頃は鏡で映したように似ておったのだがな。お互いろくでもない親父のせいで苦労するの。
そのようなことを言ってはなりません。
ならぬか。お主もおの子と戦って育てられてさえいなければ、今頃は宮中でぬくぬくとしておったかもしれんぞ。おの子として育てられたせいで、お主のような身分の者がこうして価値での流浪の身。恨めしいとは思わんか。
いいえ、私は思いません。
I saw a mysterious dream like that. A dream full of gender.
おはようございます。
おはよう。で、綾シロ、今日も体調悪いの？
As Ayashiro came to greet me, I noticed her complexion was just as bad as it had been yesterday.
もしかして肝試しが響いた？
I thought that might have caused her to have trouble sleeping since Ayashiro was the type to be easily frightened.
いえ、夕べは楽しかったですし、きちんと眠ったつもりなんですけど。
Continuing from yesterday morning, the cause of Ayashiro's condition could be sleeping soundly in the next futon was Yasumi, who was really bad at getting up in the morning. Her complexion didn't look that bad. Anyways, there was no need to wake Nami. I brought my face close to Yasumi, shaking her as I called to her in a low voice.
やすみ、そろそろ起きなさい。
ももちゃん、声変わりした。
私よ。
翔子先輩。
おはよう。目が覚めたかしら。
おはようございます。
She was turning red and then pale this morning, but her physical condition didn't seem bad.
休みの方は大丈夫みたいね。 うも調子悪いらしいのよ、綾代。
綾代先輩、大丈夫なんですか？ええ、別にそれほどひどくはないんですけど。
心当たりは何かある？
心当たり？
例えば昨日の朝に言ってた髪の長い。はいはいはい、
私見ました。巷で噂の幽霊少女秋田桃子が目撃しました。
The person who raised her hand with force was not Ayashiro.
桃子が？
桃子ちゃん見たんですか？
She gave a big nod, indicating that she'd seen it. So, one thing that I will criticize Shiro on is, regardless of which translation you use, they do a lot of overwrought writing in some points, which is not unusual in a lot of visual novels, especially older visual novels, but it's something that I always find a little bit unnecessary, and it tends to like lengthen scenes that could be punchier and paced much better. You notice that it clearly does indicate Momoko had said a thing, and that it wasn't Ayashiro who just said a thing, but they write to declare an extra detail reiterating it that Momoko is the one speaking, and after Momoko says that she did a thing, they say that she gave a big nod to say that she had given an affirmative that she'd seen something. It's just that additional level of overwrite and repetition that doesn't work very well in English, and so because we don't have great translations of it, you know, like we're using the 2008 fan translation, and the official translation is actually also pretty rough and awkward, but mostly it's just got extreme formatting and typographical issues. This comes off a little bit, you know, clunky, especially for English audiences. I do think it's just generally a little bit more than you would want, and it messes with the pacing in some of these segments. But still, this scene is great because Momoko is in it, and she is my perfect daughter.
本日未明のことなんですけどね、喉の渇きに目が覚めて水でも飲んでこようかと布団を抜けて部屋から外に出てきたわけです。それで部屋に戻ってきた時に、あれ、何か変だなって違和感を覚えたわけですね。障子はきちんと閉まっているのに、手動して月明かりを入れた時みたいに部屋の中が妙に明るかったんですね。もしや誰かが目を覚まして携帯でメールでも打ってるのかなと、そう思って部屋の中を見渡しましたら、姫先輩の体の上にぼーっと光る人影のようなものが。
Momoko overdid her retelling of the story, ending with a scream.
間違いなく幽霊少女でしたね。姫先輩の情報通り半分透けて見えましたし、しかも光っていたせいで顔もぼんやりしてました。
顔は見てないのか。
長い髪の毛も邪魔でしたし
Hello,
ね。
Bismuth.
ただし私が見たところ結構スタイル良かったんで、容疑者候補のリストから人の波は消して良いかと思われます。はい。
Momoko, don't be so mean to a child.
それでその後どうなったわけ？
映画や漫画の吸血鬼みたいに姫先輩の首筋に顔を近づけてたものですから、私勇気を振り絞って引き剥がそうと思ったわけです。それで私がうおーって指さしたらスーッと消えてしまいました。
その声聞こえて起きた人。
Silence.
ゼロか。それで
オサ先輩はももちゃんファイト。
Her voice lacked spirit, but it seemed she regained some of her resolve as she continued her explanation again.
そのすぐ後のことなんですけどね、急に部屋がガタガタミシミシ言いまして、耳を澄ますと外からは変な低い音が聞こえてくるわけですよ。ブオーブオーって。
Momoko shrieked, and her body shook as she wondered if there was something like a frightening curse of the Oni King.
誰かが墓地をひっくり返したとか罰当たりなことをして呪われたのでは。あ、放射先輩、今会って言いましたか。
いや。
The flowers of the Tokisaki no Tsubaki had fallen. Attacked by Morio, had caused the flowers of the Tokisaki no Tsubaki to fall and scatter across the ground. It was said that the flowers of that tree were used by Yasuhime to seal the Matamu.
Syouko senpai.
ちょっと考え事してただけよ。
I wonder if the two events were connected to each other. The ghost that attacked Ayashiro had appeared before the flowers had fallen, so I didn't think they were related, but...
それにしても、2日連続でこんなことがあったりするとなると、何か対策が必要よね。
Anyway. So... we of course do need to talk to that person.
相談してみるか。
相談って誰にですか。やっぱりお嬢様なのでは。本職の方ですし。
No, the person I was thinking about was someone else. Because of the direction the conversation traveled in, it turned out that I had to consult with the monk.
あれは島なりと呼ばれておる現象でしてな。地元の人間にはこの時期の風物詩のようなものですわ。
With a single stroke, the riddle of the mysterious sound that Momoko heard was cut in two, like the severing of a Gordian knot.
九郎様の祭りの時期には必ず嵐が訪れるゆえ、風も相当吹くわけですが。部長さん、ビールでも何でも構わんが、瓶の口から息を吹き入れて遊んだことは終わりかね。
あ、
原理を簡単に説明すると、つまりはそういうことなんじゃ。そのほとんどは根方さんが管理しておる銀足地にあるそうなんじゃが。
島自体が大きな笛。
祭りの始まる時期を告げる運命のホラ貝というわけじゃな。
Ah, that simple to understand explanation reassured me quite a lot.
種も仕掛けもあるものですね。
The monk laughed, showing his teeth as he rubbed his jaw, a particular trait of his.
世の中解明されていない謎は多いが、そのうち解明されるじゃろうて。
では、私が見た幽霊もそんな感じなんでしょうか。
ん？
The monk stopped rubbing his beard and gazed up at the ceiling.
そもそも仏教は幽霊を認めておりませんからな。
そうなんですか。
As we listened to the monk's reassuring explanation, the time for morning practice seems to have passed. Salmon shioyaki was the main dish this morning. With miso soup, diced eggplant, and yesterday's leftover pork, there was plenty for breakfast. However, this scene is largely the same as the scene that we've seen in other routes, so I'm simply going to quick save, head through here, and of course we need to wait and see. Underneath a piercing blue sky, the sound of wooden swords clashing rang out. After we had finished going through our stretching exercises carefully, we took our wooden swords and began practice.
Syouko senpai,
Yasumi's whistle blew. It was time for a 10-minute break. We didn't have our protectors, but we still had to be careful to replace fluids and prevent heat stroke. It was fine to leave all that to Yasumi for someone with bad luck. It was a good time for me to be the captain. I didn't have as many connections and bonds as Akiko-sen, but in this world, I think bonds and relationships are far more important than luck. And speaking of relationships formed on this trip. Ah, yes. Mikiwa's confrontation there. Ah. Hold on. That's right.
クイックロードした
I
の
forgot there's a variation of this scene that we get. Alright. Migiwa used a forward stance. However, since she said she was a beginner at kendo, her stance was a little strange. Like what had happened to a dragonfly with a finger is pressed down on it, the end of her weapon turned round and round. Many people didn't like staying still and made small movements, but those could be read by experienced people, so it wasn't good. However, the funny thing about Migiwa's circular movements was that it had no openings. I don't know what type of training she'd done, but Migiwa's wrists were extremely strong. Just now, even though I knew she would twist her sword around mine, I prepared myself. I still feared my sword would fly away. However, tightly gripping my sword in fear wouldn't allow me to properly swing it. I changed to hold my sword in a front stance. I slowly took a breath and tightened my stomach muscles as I exhaled, taking twice as long as normal. In order to keep her from perceiving my breathing, I didn't move my shoulders up and down to expand my lungs. I focused my spirit. The roar of the sea grew distant. It's not that I didn't hear it, but it was like I looked down from above, taking in everything. This feeling felt good. Like this, I would surely be able to do well. Stiffening my resolve, I closed the distance by half a step. In order for her not to notice I'd gotten closer, I carefully slid my foot forward. Back straight, feet shoulder width apart with the right in front, sword in hand. I lifted the left heel and slowly slid forward. As I was thinking about it, my body was already moving. I rushed in, swung my sword faster than I had before. Out of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of swings I've made, this was the closest to the ones Natsume-san had made. I let go with my right hand, only holding it with my left as I stretched it out further than normal. I stretched out the tip of the sword, chasing after Migiwa, who tried to escape backwards. I'd planned on stopping short of contact, but I couldn't stop the force in the one arm that stretched out. The part I hit was Migiwa's forehead.
まさか
Judging by the force of impact, I shouldn't have hit her hard enough to injure her, but I was concerned about her condition.
私口先だけじゃなく油断してた
まあまあミギーさん
Momoko thumped the stunned Migiwa on the shoulder.
長先輩個人は全国レベルの猛者ですから負けたからってそう落ち込むほどのものじゃないですよああそうね私の負け
Migiwa threw away the bamboo sword.
ほらにしても今の動き
Hehehe.
お昼はおかゆで
So for lunch we were having chayu, rice gruel made with tea. Accommodate Momoko, who went on and on about meat. It resembled Chinese-style gruel with toppings like ground chicken. There were also edamame with sleet vinegar for dessert, a tomato sliced in half, good for lowering the body temperature. Following from yesterday's summer, today's lunch was also suited for the harsh heat of the south, and everyone was pleased. Quietly, food disappeared from the table.
というわけで海に行きましょう
Yes, and there's the conversation about the ocean. However, now, I went into the Sala forest. Concerned about yesterday's dream, I went into the Sala forest just as I had last night. The one that had been called the Tengu, who was not just a normal human, might not show herself in the bright light of day, but if those not human hid themselves during the day, then it was a waste to bring along Komochi to fend off the Morio. However, holding the wooden sword made from the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, I headed to the location of that tree. Forgive me. That tree whose flowers had scattered. Perhaps they were satisfied with the test of courage last night, or maybe they went to the ocean, but there was no one else here. As I proceeded through the forest by myself, I reminisced about the strange dream I'd had last night. I saw a dream, knowing it was a dream. In the dream I saw, I was a little girl younger than Nami. However, I was talking to that person who still remained unchanged to this day. The person in my dreams was...
そのことですけど、クロ様。男なりをしていても、あなたは女人なのでしょ?
I'd called that person Kuro-sama, which was the same name as the dragon god Urashima worshipped. I'd thought she was a Tsubaki spirit, and that person said she had also been called the Tengu. The wind rustled the grass and leaves, and the sound indicated something coming in a straight line. I heard the sound of something heavy stepping through the underbrush. Startled, I held up Kumochi. In the light of day, what appeared was... I held Kumochi in a forward stance as I faced the underbrush in the direction of the sound. The sound got louder, and what appeared from the underbrush was...
なんだ、Osaka。
右は
It wasn't a Morio, but Mikiwa. She was holding a long bag. I wondered if that fishing pole was the fishing pole she'd hung out near the Oni stepping stones. Mikiwa first glanced at Kumochi, then at what was probably my relieved face. I wondered what she thought. Perhaps she thought I was a wimp, or perhaps she thought I was a weird girl for yelling some incomprehensible phrase like Morio. Flustered, I relaxed my stance and lowered the point of Kumochi.
Nani?
Maybe it was due to embarrassment, but even I could clearly tell that I was acting rudely.
いや、別に。
Mikiwa didn't act like it was nothing because she kept staring at me.
それで。
She poised herself a bit.
おさ、こんなところで何やってるわけ?
That's what she asked. Well, we're going to tell her this time. And so I started to talk about the reason I came to the Sala Forest, about the person I met on the first night, when I pretended nothing had happened when Mikiwa had asked me about it, about that mysterious person who summoned up feelings that didn't belong to me.
最初に来た日に椿の森で会ったのよ。椿の花みたいな赤い狩衣姿で同じ色の右目で。左目は?
On the first night, Mikiwa got a clue when I said it wasn't Mikiwa, and this time she focused on that person's right eye. Did she just want to know everything a person does, or does she have some sort of special reason?
見たことない。ずっとつむってるから。
I thought it was weird that Mikiwa was this surprised. Nowadays, people could get an artificial eye, but I didn't think that in the past a one-eyed person would be that unusual.
髪は? 髪の色は? 綺麗な白よ。ナミよりもさらに白い。
Nami's hair had a hint of blue, which matched the white waves of the sea. That person's hair was even whiter, like piled snow.
石が爆発。
Mikiwa lined up the three special characteristics of that person, connected the dots, and then opened her eyes wide.
石岩白髪の陰陽師。石岩期。石岩期?
She narrowed her eyes, which had a dangerous glint in them. In a serious tone of voice, Mikiwa spoke.
危険な鬼よ。大昔からいるっていう危険な鬼。
She was saying that person was a fearsome Oni. She was saying that person was an Oni targeting the sword of Ryukyu.
あの人が 剣を狙う赤眼鬼。
Was she really such a fearsome Oni? That person had saved me from the dream, and the real me as well. Wasn't Kurosama not an Oni, but the dragon god who sealed the Oni king? I realized that I hadn't told Mikiwa about the information I learned from my dream last night.
そういえば夢の中ではクロウ様って
Syouko. Mikiwa had a noticeable reaction to my statement. I thought Mikiwa was reacting to the name Kurosama, but apparently she was concerned about something else.
夢か。夢で操られる。何を右は変な顔して。
As if she were lining up a target with a rifle, Mikiwa squinted her left eye while opening her right wide. The difference between her left and right eyes resembled that person, but the light in her eyes was cold blue and not red.
見えないけど何か普通と違う。
Mikiwa muttered something. Similar to using a mirror from ages in the past, I was reflected in her right eye.
まさか。いや、注意だけは。
What exactly was she looking for? She let out a big sigh and the balance of her face returned to normal. However, the hard look in her eyes remained as she spoke.
それでオサはその赤眼鬼をどう思ってるわけ？
Let's see. Well, I don't think she's dangerous.
私は
I shook my head at Mikiwa's question. I didn't think that person was a dangerous Oni.
普通はもっと警戒するものじゃない？だって私を助けてくれて信頼を得るために自作自演。よくある話でしょ。オサが見た夢だってあやかしの術が見せた幻だって可能性があるのよ。
She was saying that a well-known technique for brainwashing me into becoming that person's ally. I knew that the feeling I felt when I first met her didn't belong to me, so I couldn't really make a strong rebuttal. Even now, inside of me.
ま、本人に会ってみればわかることだけどね。オサ、案内してくれる？わかった。
We went to the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, whose flowers had scattered, but we didn't see that person here. I guess those who aren't human like Oni will only appear at night. She said she would give me training today as well, so if I came here at night, I might be able to meet her.
雨か。
It started to rain. The moment after, I recognized that drops of water were hitting my temple. They became a line, and the lines increased in density until they became a sheet, as a torrential rain resembling pure water fell. The rain was such that if I had an umbrella, I might not have been able to hold it up just using one hand. I wondered if it was telling me to cool my head off a little.
戻りましょう。なんとかは風邪ひかないらしいけど、私はなんとかじゃないからね。
After returning to Shoshinji, Yasumi and the others had also gotten back from shopping and presented me with a gift. What, exactly, was this? Were they telling me to wear this? It seemed to be an incredible swimsuit. Everyone was going to the beach tomorrow, so when Yasumi went to buy a swimsuit, it seems she also picked one out for me. However, since there'd been a campaign by some interested parties to buy that present, it was difficult to just flatly refuse it. What should I do?
Oh, 部長さん。
Before dinner at dusk, if the days were short, it'd already be dark. The monk finished his rounds and stopped me in the hall.
構いませんけど。
仰いでくだされ。
He moved the round fan in his hand in a big gesture.
は、ブスでも取りに行きますか？
Then the monk, advanced in his years, would be playing the part of a priest in the play. I didn't really understand what he wanted.
うちわでひたすら根気よく暑さに耐えて仰いでくだされ。
Anyways, it seemed to be fine if I just borrowed the monk's fan and waved it around. And so... Temaki dinner! And then, of course, we have a long conversation about temaki. And then, after dinner, it was time to relax in our free time. That's right. After relaxing soak in the baths, I remembered something. In the end, I didn't meet that person during the day. It was a good thing that I remembered this before going for training. I wanted to discuss with that person about the long-haired ghost that had attacked Ayashiro. If she brought the rights to Uroshima, she'd know about ghosts, and if she were Kurosama, then she was a god who sealed the Oni king. However, I'd also uncovered someone closer who I could discuss this with. That's right, Migiwa was an Onikiri, so perhaps mysterious events like this were her field of expertise. I love these white transitions.
鬼になるやつもいればならないやつもいる。中国の方だと死者の魂は全部鬼だけどね。
Even when I suddenly asked a question out of the blue like that, Migiwa answered smoothly and without any hesitation. She then looked at me with a strange expression in her face.
オサが鬼化して知ってるんじゃない？
やめてよね、縁起でもない。
Migiwa suspected the possibility that person was the Sekiganki and was using me as a puppet.
本当に縁起でもない。
とりあえず実験してみる？
実験？
Migiwa searched the bag at her waist and took out a couple of bundles of paper. There was something like writing on those pieces of paper, but it was unfamiliar to me.
ここに霊が通り抜けるのを封じるお札があります。これ
外から幽霊が入ってくることはない。
They wouldn't work against Oni with a physical form like Mario, but they were quite effective protection against those without a body.
でも、もし私や
全く意味がないわね。
But if we put those up, we would clearly know whether we were dealing with an internal factor or not. If nothing happened to Ayashiro, then we wouldn't know what really happened at all. But that was fine.
とりあえず貼ってくれる？
Besides preventing spirits from entering, it would also conceal our presence, which was a very valuable thing. Because we couldn't detect the presence of the other party, we couldn't just lie in wait and ambush. Well, let me just leave it at that for now. It's not that I didn't trust Migiwa, but it's better to consider a variety of angles, so I wanted to ask that person's opinion as well. Migiwa, who had suspicions that person was the Sekiganki, would naturally suspect me next. Well, I suppose that was fine.
いきなり喧嘩を売るような態度を取るのはやめてほしいわね。
それは相手次第ってところかな。
Beneath the Tokusaki no Tsubaki whose blossoms had scattered, that person was there. And the instant I saw her figure. Before I could stop her, Migiwa attacked. The vermilion pole collided with the long sword, causing sparks to fly in the darkness.
戦上手の鬼人と呼ばれたこのわしがかような子供騙しに乗ると思ったか。卑怯卑劣と言われる戦はわしの得意とするところ。パラゲーだけには馴染めぬままだが、夜打ち朝がけ絡めて吹く手、それらはわしの好物じゃ。
She seemed to consider attacking a master in his sleep a common tactic for students, and licked her lips like a fierce feline. Migiwa also had the air of a feline, but the presence of a true Oni was really different.
赤眼鬼。わしが赤眼鬼だと？赤眼の陰陽師というとあやつか。鬼一方言、バローリ。あんたじゃない。お主も人を見る目がないな。よりにもよって、わしとあやつを間違えるなど、血がつながっているわけではないのにな。
As the Onikiri and Oni continued their conversation, they still proceeded to clash pole and sword in fierce combat. Still, by the way she spoke, though she denied she was the Sekiganki, it seemed she knew who was. Ah, that's right. In my dream, this person was Kuro-sama. If that meant Urashima's sea god, then according to legend, she also knew the Oni king. If that were the case, then this person wasn't Migiwa's enemy.
お主四天のものだな。鬼切りで四天頭の。だったら何？ならば好きなりなんなりで主らの頭鬼切り役に連絡をつけてみるがいい。剣の森手紅白に会うたとな。紅白？九郎様。
She narrowed her crescent eyebrows suspiciously at my words. She then sheathed her red gold sword in a beautiful scabbard.
九郎ではない。わしは紅白だ。
As if to emphasize it. After saying that to me, she used her solitary red right eye to look at Migiwa and speak.
わしは紅白。剣を竜宮に持ち込んだ張本人だ。お主らの不手際のせいで、またこの紅白が目覚めたと。まあ、いいけど。もしもし、バカ？こんな時間だけど休養。
I do appreciate how Kohaku said, "Yes, you there. You must be able to send a shiki to your masters and relay this information." But Mikiwa, she's like, "No, we have cell phones now."
ショウコ、なんだあれは。携帯電話。遠くの同じようなものを持った人と話ができるようになる道具です。一般人、誰にでも使える道具です。ほほ、それは便利なものが出回ったものだな。
I do love that.
後で四天王さに高に入手することにしよう。
あ、
はい、確かに紅白と。私の方が協力して剣気から剣を奪回しろですって？まったく、なんで私が。おい四天王、そろそろ潮時ではないか？踏み石の見張りに行ってきます。じゃあおさ、また後で。
Migiwa went off to watch the stepping stones where Oni would pass through, leaving Kohaku and I alone. I was prepared to be worked to exhaustion like last night, but perhaps Migiwa had satisfied her somewhat, since that didn't happen. She also acknowledged that because of the resemblance, it was easy to mistake her for the Sekiganki.
気にするな。別段潰れておるわけではない。
This is just a really nice, this is a nice scene.
長年の習性でな。開けておくよりこうした方が楽というだけだ。翔子、お主は目を開いておるのとつむっているの。どちらが楽だ？だけど片方だけっていうのは不自由ないと言っている。些細なことなど捨ておけ。こちらを資格と思うなら、わしと立ち会い勝ってみよ。それに片目をつむっておると急に暗がりに入った時などに重宝するのじゃ。まあこれも一つの用心よ。なるほど、それがあなたの虎の子ですか。そうともそうだとも、この左目こそがわしの虎の子よ。
By the way, we didn't just sit on the roots beneath the Tsubaki, but also walked around the Sal forest. Migiwa would only return when the tides covered up that road, so there wasn't any need for us to stay in a single place. Now that I think about it, the location where I met Kohaku on the first night here was much closer to Shoshinji. And as we were returning from our stroll through the forest at night, a person was quietly standing over there. The person in black, looking up at the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, whose flowers had scattered, didn't stir. She just stood there, looking mournful. From where I was looking, all I could see was her back, clothed in black. But why did a sharp pain suddenly run through my nose, move me to tears? I wanted to call out her name, but my heart clenched and I couldn't form any words.
翔ちゃん、待っていて。もうすぐあなたを見つけたぞ。元気。誰？鬼だよ、鬼。お主と同じ人ではないものだ。鬼か。そうだな。そうだろう。それで私に何の用です？私はあなたに用事などない。同じ鬼ではないか。そうつれないことを言うな。お主の背負った荷の中のもの、一つわしにくれんかね。中身を知った上でのことですか？知っているから剣気と呼んだ。剣に疲れた剣の鬼。あなた、渡すつもりがないならば力ずくにでも置いていってもらおう。
Both parties drew their swords. The clash of blades made sparks fly. Lit up by the flying sparks, the two of them faced each other, inches apart, separated by their blades as they glared at one another. On one side was a short shadow with white hair and a white complexion, dressed in her red kariginu. The first time I saw her, she'd given me the impression of a Tsubaki spirit, and tonight, as well, her unnaturally white skin seemed to glow. Even against a taller opponent, she wasn't pushed back, and her expression didn't suit her. Of course, there was also technique to consider, but sword fighting relied greatly on strength, so she was clearly not just a normal girl. Her face was like that of a finely crafted doll, and though there were no scars, one blemish stood out. Against a bright red eye, like a glossy pomegranate or ripe winter cherry, the left was closed, giving her an unbalanced look. Though she'd said it wasn't crushed in particular, and that it was like a tiger's cub, it was her precious treasure. In the other party was a young woman dressed in black, who had been called the Kinky. The moonlight was filtered through the leaves. Because it was night and she was also moving fast, I couldn't clearly see her face. She held a normal sword in her hand, but living up to being called a sword demon, the strength and speed of her strikes weren't normal. The swing of her sword burned into my eyes, so she must be wearing black clothes because she liked that color. Wait, that was a strange interjection, Syouko. However, the speed of her sword was not that of the person I so admired. It was far beyond normal human limits. It was fitting to call her a Kinky, a sword demon. It was a fight far beyond normal people, a duel between Oni and Oni, long sword versus sword. Their sublime fight froze my legs and lips, and I forgot to blink or even breathe. I could do nothing but watch.
剣の技は悪くない。まだそれほど長くは生きていないだろうに、なかなかと言っていい腕前だ。視点が剣気と称することだけはある。しかしだ剣気、貴様程度の鬼にその剣が使いこなせるものか。そいつは形通りの諸刃の剣だ。必ずやお主の身も滅ぼすぞ。さあ、それをわしに渡すがよい。お主、すでにそれに毒されておるのだよ。目的を果たす前に渡せるものか。好みの鬼と化し、人であることを捨てた時、負けの終わりはないだろうとすでに。その剣が呼ぶのは己の滅びだけではないぞ。何が望みだ、言ってみろ。剣などなくても叶うことなら、わしが合力してやってもいい。
Yes, so this is a scene that also appeared in Kaya's route, but it's much more interesting in my opinion in Kohaku's route. Kohaku and the young woman dressed in black that she was fighting. Because of the bright moonlight and the speed of their movements, I couldn't really see her face, but that swordsmanship, that gesture, I remembered that swordsmanship. If my suspicions were correct, there's no doubt that that person is Natsune-san.
私の目的は
That sword was a cursed item from the Age of Gods. Then there should be things that only that sword can accomplish.
この浦島で見栄を捧げられる目方のわだちめ
The look in her eyes indicated a strong determination.
切りに来た
She declared her purpose in coming here.
そのためだけに剣を探しそのためだけに剣を手に入れたの
With a strong look in her eyes, Natsune-san declared that she was here to kill a god. If I hadn't been affected beforehand by such things like Oni, gods, or Shikigami, I might have worried for her. I might even have laughed. However, And then that girl laughed in my place.
神を切るだとたわけたことを笑わせるな剣気調子に乗るな剣気お主ごときに神が切れるものか切ってみせるいや無理だねお主では無理だ無理などではない切れるはずだ神さえ葬る神よの呪物その力をもってすればクロークルートで切れないはずがない確かにお主の言う通り剣は人の手に余る神器だだからこそ無理だと言っておるお主は神を切る前に神を切ること自体を忘れる悪いことは言わん神を切ろうなどという馬鹿げた考えと剣を捨ててここから去れ和田摘みの都へ至る門を開こうなどと思うなよしんば神の身元にたどり着けたとしてもお主はおそらく身動き一つ満足にできんだろう言ったな試してみるか
Provoked by those words, Natsune-san held her sword, not the sword, but a normal Japanese blade, in a high stance.
試してみろ
The fierce and frightening war cry made me cringe, and reflexively I closed my eyes. At the next instant, I felt a mysterious pressure that made my hair stand on end. Natsune-san was nicknamed the Hisha, or Rook, which was a piece that could reach all the way across the board, just like her attack right now. Her long, fast strike stretched out. By the time I lifted my eyelids, the opponent would probably be cut down. However, Natsune-san didn't move forward a single step.
どうだ動けるであろう
During the time it took to blink exactly what had happened, Natsune-san was still holding her sword in a high stance as her movements were frozen. Kohaku didn't even bother staying on guard as she laughed and took one step closer to Natsune-san, who couldn't move.
全身がすくみ上がり動けるであろうわしが相手でそのざまだいわんや瑠璃宮の竜神王や剣を持とうが何を持とうがそれを手にしたお主自身が動けぬようでは無用の長物に過ぎるのだお主にはクロークルーの相手は無理だ言うな
Even then, Natsune-san made her lips move and muttered those words. Her body started to quiver.
私は
Natsune-san filled her frozen muscles with an even greater power than the one binding them in order to advance.
私は神を切らなければいけない
She opened her eyes wide and they flashed with something that looked bitter, like tears of blood. She swung her sword and broke the binding spell.
クロークルーを切らねばならないほうかの主外もそうして虎を逆にすくめたと聞くが参ったなどうやらお主の信念だけは孫うことなき本物のようだだがそれでも認めるわけにはいかんな
Squinting, her right eye slightly, she only drew back her body near the tip of the blade and dodged Natsune-san's attack. The tip of Natsume-sen's sword was left in a ready stance and pointed right at her opponent's throat. If Natsume-sen took half a step forward, the sharp tip of the sword would probably rend the throat and cause death. And in truth, after a moment of hesitation, Natsume-sen proceeded to do just that. However, her opponent was faster. She rushed forward and used her left hand to knock down the back of the sword with her left palm. With that sudden increase in speed, the sword couldn't stop. It didn't hit the front like it should have, but empty air and then to ground. Such humiliation. And that was just the first. Natsume-sen lifted her sword in order to quickly readjust her stance, but that girl was even faster. She lifted her foot as she moved back and dodged and slid forward. She stepped on the back of Natsume-sen's sword with the sole of her foot and drove it further into the ground. No matter how small she was, a human didn't have the physical strength to lift it up, even when someone was standing on top of it. At the same time, she swung her long sword at Natsume-sen's exposed neck. Slam. Finally, the girl's foot stepped onto the ground and Natsume-sen's sword tumbled onto the earth. Though that should have been an unstable position, the girl's movements were very composed. She swung the long sword at Natsume-sen's throat.
遠避遠海の足とて頭の上から降りかかる刃に飛び乗るなどという大道芸はなかなかうまくやらんよ。
Natsume-sen jumped back, increasing the distance between the two of them. Her beloved sword lay fallen at Kohaku's feet.
さあ、どうするケンキ?
Kohaku mercilessly swung her sword at Natsume-sen, who was unarmed after dropping her own weapon. From the right, from the left, diagonally. At the outset, Natsume-sen was just barely able to dodge, but she couldn't maintain that for long. In the dark night, a crimson flower bloomed. The sword, which was swung around without restraint, caught Natsume-sen's upper arm, resulting in a shallow slash. It wasn't a life-threatening injury, but there was no doubt that the blood flowing from it robbed her of stamina.
丸腰のお主など、わしの相手になるものか。お主が改心せんのならば仕方あるまい。わしとてこちらのやり方の方が楽だ。その猛念ごと叩き切ってやろう。まだ。まだ抜きたくはなかったけど、仕方がない。抜くか、剣を。仕方あるまい。今の私は剣気ゆえに、剣によって道を開くしか方法を持たないのだ。
For a moment, I lost track of my own thoughts. A low, guttural, pained moan like that of a beast emanated from Natsume-sen's mouth.
抜いたか。剣を抜き寄ったか。冬を切るためならば、私は鬼にでも何にでもなろう。剣にコンパクを食らわれてもか。クルーを切った後ならば、私の魂ならいくらでもくれてやろう。語りだけ無駄か。しかぶりの剣の正気。しかもとやき。わしと違って加減せずに引き出してね。それではお主。
Kohaku reprimanded me as I jumped forward without thinking. After giving a resigned sigh, she slowly raised her eyelids. Her closed left eye also lifted, following her right, revealing a hidden orb.
Syouko!
Besides being told to look at her, I was also fascinated, so I gazed intently. I believe my thinking was out of place in a situation like this, but to me, the eye of that Oni, something not human, was... Those were my thoughts. I wanted to more closely examine the light given off by that amber-colored eye. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't talk. My autonomous action was sealed by one glare of a tiger. The power of Kohaku sealed by her eyelid was what had sealed Natsune-san earlier. And if I had not stopped moving, the location where I would have been was where Natsune-san was where the kinky now had swung down the sword. And then Kohaku tried to use the power of her eye to once again seal the movements of the kinky, but the other side probably had more power drawn from the sword. Under the influence of the sword that Natsune-san had achieved, the power of Kohaku's tiger eye didn't work. And that showed how enormous the power of the cursed item from the age of the gods could be. A large amount of power would attract small power to it. The crowd came closer to me, who could neither fight nor flee. And then Kohaku. I was in a location where she couldn't physically reach me, and I was in a condition where I couldn't reach out my hand. The hands of the Morio were almost upon me. At the sound of Kohaku's voice, on the opposite side of the pouncing Morio, like as a snake rears its head to intimidate prey, there's the sound of a long sword slicing the air. The Morio pouncing towards me was suddenly stopped. It wasn't that I could freely move my body again. The Morio, still hanging in midair, was physically stopped. There was something behind me. The power given off by the sword was also powerful, and it prickled my skin like a numbing needle, but this energy given off by it would dissipate in the air, so I could only feel something vaguely. In contrast, the thing behind me was a huge Oni, and with its huge fist it crushed the head of the Morio. Well, it's been a long time since we've had an Oniwaka voice line. A shikigami that resided within Kohaku's longsword, Oniwaka. Oniwaka used its overwhelming body and overwhelming strength to crush the Morio that drew near me, but in contrast, the Morio were individually not very strong, but their numbers were not to be taken lightly. After defeating one, another would pop up. There was no end to them as they kept being defeated. Oniwaka, a shikigami, didn't look fatigued, but its owner, Kohaku, might be the miasma of the sword, but her forte, her quickness and agility started to show signs of decline. At long last, the attacks of the kinki managed to injure Kohaku. Alright, this is an important choice here. I will not only looking, or I will only looking. I will not only looking. One moment, I'll need to screen cap this for posterity. I will not only looking. Was it okay for me to just stay here and watch like this? That couldn't be true. The golden light that struck me and burned itself into my retina. Even with my mouth closed, I intently watched that eye. There was the sound of a sharp exhalation mixed in with the sound of grinding teeth. I had to move. If I didn't move, Oniwaka couldn't go to Kohaku's side, and that beautiful light would disappear. It had to protect me, who couldn't move, Freed from the constraint of that order, Oniwaka ran forward. Letting forth a roar, it ran. It rushed towards Natsune-san, Kinki, whose reasoning was swallowed up by the sword at the moment. Even then, Oniwaka didn't stop and continued to charge forth against Oniwaka with unsurpassed strength and a body like steel fortress that could stop swords, arrows, teeth, and claws. A cursed item that couldn't even bury a god easily sliced through it. Natsune-san right now was almost like its natural enemy. In addition, Oniwaka was Kohaku's Shikigami. In other words, his form was composed of pure power. That sword devours power. The sword that pierced Oniwaka started to devour the power that gave him his shape. Around the area where the sword pierced its flank, a slight black hole opened where fog and dust-like power poured out. Even then, Oniwaka, who was so tall you had to crane your neck up to look at him, swung down at the Kinki with all his might. However, the Kinki used the sword to stop even that. Where the sword touched Oniwaka's fist, it splintered the power there, and while pulsating gladly, started to drain it dry. Following the physical laws of nature, the combo of mass and speed and pure power was all dispelled before reaching the Kinki. In a duel against the sword, which wouldn't even allow itself to be touched, was the worst match for a Shikigami. Kohaku's strike sliced Natsune-san. A spray of blood. Natsune-san retreated and maintained some distance away from both Kohaku and Oniwaka. Kohaku swung Hoemaru in her hand, giving an order for Oniwaka to stand down. With a whoosh, the form of Oniwaka vanished into thin air. It resembled the way Morio disappeared, but Oniwaka didn't crumble. Only dissipated. It was a good thing he disappeared before being destroyed altogether. Natsune-san left the area through the gap that was created. She wanted to chase after Natsune-san, but before she could rush forward, she collapsed onto one knee. And then Well, we're going to take care of Kohaku.
琥珀さん。案ずるでない。鬼若を使うと大抵こうなる。あのデカブツが動くのに必要な力の大半をわしの体で払っておるのだからな。しかも今回は剣に刺されおった。わしが直接刺されたわけではないから、この肉体には傷一つついておらんが。
Kohaku leaned against the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, and with a pained look on her face, closed her eyes.
右はそれどうしたの?
And that is where we will leave off for tonight. Thank you everyone for joining us again. I hope that you are all enjoying Kohaku's route. And we will no doubt find some interesting things next time as well. Please look forward to it. And until then, thank you all and good night.